Hi everyone, Chris here. I am recording week 6's lecture, and I am starting a little bit obviously behind. Want to acknowledge that and thank you all for your patience. We got hit with a couple of feet of snow, and so uh, it's been a weird couple of weeks. I don't know if it's been weird on your side of uh, the country, but yeah, been been a rough couple of weeks. So thanks for your patience. Today is week 6. I'm recording this on Wednesday, I believe, 25th. Um, we're going to be talking about problem identification, root cause, including the Imagine framework, which you are going to need to know about for one of your assignments coming up. The check-in today, I just wanted to talk about gratitude. Gratitude practice is something that feels very, I don't know, it can feel fake, it can feel forced, it can feel icky. But there have been studies done, and if you engage in a gratitude practice where even if you write down like 1 to 3 things each day in the morning or at night before you go to bed, if you track that, gratitude practice is something that uh, can really help reshape the way you think about things and the way that you approach things. And so, um, I think one of the things that I've learned about, especially if we're talking about, you know, a company or groups or, you know, uh, communities, is I think it's really important for us to acknowledge each other's humanity and like where we're at in the moment before we move on to business. Asking people to just drop into a space and be able to completely just engage with the material without giving everyone a moment to kind of acknowledge where they're at can make it difficult to move forward. Um, Especially with everything that's going on in the world right now. That's why I try to have these check-in moments, um, so that you can even kind of orient yourself to the lecture here, even if you're playing it on double time, um, to just kind of pause and reflect and feel where you're at. So I offer the moment of gratitude, or the practice of gratitude as a potential check-in point. Like if you're in a group or if you're in a meeting and you're just like feeling like things are off, or like people just need to acknowledge their humanity and how weird everything is at the moment, or that kind of thing. Gratitude is a really helpful approach and kind of trains your brain to think about things a bit differently. So the biggest thing I'm grateful for right now is for our random February blizzard here in New England, in Rhode Island, that we didn't lose our power. Like, I'm just so very grateful for that. And I'm like just beyond grateful for that. If we had lost power, I don't know how we would have made it through the time being stuck in the house for a few days. So, yeah, wanted to offer that. Some general reminders. We have our weekly readings and resources. So make sure you go over that. You got your weekly activities and your minute paper. Don't forget to do those things. I'm going to have the third optional synchronous Zoom session. The assignment review for the first part, at least. If I can't get into the second part, I'll do another one. But the first part of the organizational change plan proposal. So it's the proposal itself. Okay. Um, I also got sick. So, thank you again for being patient with me. That is for this Friday, at 1 p.m. your time, so 3 p.m. my time. The organization change plan part 1, which is the change initiative proposal, is due Monday, March 9th. If you all need me to finagle that at all, please let me know. A few of you reached out to me about having a little bit of extra time or some wiggle room with the assignment that was due this past Monday. I'm totally fine with that. Like, whatever you need, just let me know. Yeah, I just ask that you be in communication with me. Your individual meeting for with me, and then key leader interview. I think at least half of the class has signed up for an individual meeting with me, so thank you so much for that. I also just wanted to drop in that the key leader interview is, due, uh, I believe I meant to put in the dates here. I apologize, but you can drop into the assignments to see the specific dates that are due. If that coincides with, if you're looking at like your planner or your organizational kind of schema, however you've got it, if you're noticing that a bunch of um courses, like a bunch of your classes are having a bunch of like assignments due at the same time, you would think that our faculty and staff are able to communicate these things to each other, but it's not that way. And I apologize for that. I wish there was like a better way of doing it, but at the very least, if you're able to communicate that to me or to your other professors, like we're 9 out of the 10 professors, nine out of 10 times, anytime I mentioned to a professor I needed more time, or I mentioned that there was like something due, or multiple things due at once, people were willing to finagle it. They just didn't know. So please know that we're also human, and this is like a new iteration of the program and the different like syllabi and this is our first rollout of these courses. So um I want to give you like the structure and the context, but we also, I mean, goodness, I graduated from this program in 2022. So it's been a few minutes for me. So yeah, thank you for keeping me honest on that stuff, because I wouldn't know otherwise. And I want to know because I want to support y'all in your learning and make it not super stressful. I guarantee you we're not like, you know, sitting behind the scenes like, oh yes, how do we make it harder for everyone? Like, no, that's just, yeah, that's not the intention at all. I also wanted to throw a few other reminders out there for you. Week 5 has no video ant lecture. Um, so don't worry about that. I apologize again. I just things got a bit away from me. And then if you can just make sure to check your announcements regularly, uh, that's how I kind of blast out to everybody what's going on, and the fact that like, if I'm going to be late on something or when something's published, um, and just make sure to like read the full announcement. I had a couple of questions about why folks weren't able to access the week 5 lecture. And it's just because there wasn't one, but I had dropped it in an announcement. I get that things are busy and everything, and it's kind of hard to know where to go to find the different things. Um, so to I want to make sure that y'all realize that just reading the announcements that I roll out, even if it looks like it's just the generic one, um, is going to be the best bet of kind of tracking everything that's going on. I also didn't realize that y'all had internship applications kind of coming up or just becoming available this week. So again, that's one of those things where we probably should have eyes on it as a school, but we don't. I mean, the program, there are just multiple things happening at the same time. So I would have probably bumped out the assignment to be due like the first week in March, had I realized that that was aligning at the same time, because I know how important it is to get those apps out for the internships that you're most excited about. And I remember how involved those are and everything. So, yeah, I just wanted to acknowledge that. And thank you for those of you who did mention that to me, because I was a little bit worried not hearing from y'all about assignments and stuff if there were questions. Um, week 4 did have 2-minute papers. So if you did 2 of them, don't freak out. Or if you're getting a notification in your grade book, I don't know how that happened. I'm still trying to figure it out. It was a tech issue. So thank you again for your patience with me. I am doing the best I can here too. And I'm definitely learning some things this semester. So trying to be real with y'all in my accountability and not saying things as an excuse. I'm just trying to take ownership here and just let y'all know what's going on with me. And just, that perspective. Your education is super important to me. I've been there, I've done it. I'm in the field right now too, and it's heavy. So I appreciate you allowing me this space to show up how I am capable of showing up. All right. With all that being said, let's talk about week 6. So we are going to be talking about the just problem solving in general, kind of in broad terms. We're going to talk about primary and secondary data sources, frameworks for change, and I apologize, I put the asterisk on the wrong place here. Not the prepare framework, but the imagine framework is the one that we're going to be using for the organization change plan. So just know that you might be revisiting these slides or this video for that. That's actually for the second part of the organizational change plan. So not this one that's coming due, but for the presentation that you'll be doing later on in this semester. Okay. So problem solving. What is problem solving? This, like, I just want to give you a heads up. This lecture's content feels kind of obvious or seems obvious. It's kind of intuitive. The reason I wanted to spell this stuff out for you and really reiterate the readings this week is that just because it feels obvious or like, intuitive, there are times that like when you get out in the real world, like when you're doing your job, when you're encountering a thing for the first time, where you might get stuck. And so it can be super helpful to identify these steps and be able to come back to them if you get stuck, because then you can see, oh, we skipped a couple things, or oh, I need to kind of, finagle this piece. I've got a quote here, nothing is as invisible as the obvious. So if this feels like, I don't know, duh, it kind of is, but also kind of important to, be able to articulate this and revisit it in case you get stuck in the future. Okay. So what's a problem? Problem is the difference between what is and what can or should be. So, the reality of our context right now, the reality of our situation, the systems, how they are broken or functioning just as they were intended to function, which is unfortunately, not ideal for a lot of the people they are serving. Um, and what we can imagine to be true, or what we can imagine these systems to be, or these communities to be. And again, not we meaning me as the individual, me as the social worker, but me as, a vessel for the intention behind this community, this organization, with their express and, voluntary uh, involvement in formulating, even identifying the problem, right? And identifying and imagining the solutions or what it could be, right? So I don't get to tell them what could be or should be, right? Um, so the advantages of problems, we don't really think of problems as advantages. And like, I, there's so much like corporate talk and corporate speak about not using the P word, not using the problem word. We say areas of growth, areas of opportunity, rough edges, those kinds of things. Um, we don't really think of them as advantageous, right? Um, Most problems are solvable or improvable. Um, Something that we could identify as a problem or as an area of opportunity is really just a place where we could make something good happen or different happen. Um, they can also be challenges that make life interesting and sometimes fun. Um, One of the things that I like about challenges and the difficulties that we encounter in our work is that it allows me an opportunity to grow, you know, um, hopefully with my client or with my the community I'm serving or with the organization I'm working for. I don't want to be stagnant, right? I want to constantly be challenged to grow. But the other thing is too is if we don't have suffering, right? If we don't have discomfort, if we don't have problems, then what's the point in trying to make anything better, um if we don't have these sharp edges, right? Like I put this picture here. It's just gems, like rough gems versus gems that have been put through like a rock polisher, like a rock tumbler. Like eventually those things are what become the smooth edges, right? Like um it's a part of who we are, like to encounter difficulties and want to improve them and to solve problems, right? Um, to support each other and ourselves in making things better. So that's a positive, you know? Uh, why why is a group problem solving process important? We're never going to be an island, right? Um, Especially if we're talking big, like community-wide issues, nationwide issues, worldwide issues, like heck, climate change. There are so many different things that we could think about on a, micro, meso, or macro scale, right? So why is a group problem solving process important? Well, the more perspectives that we have available to us, people who think differently from us, who have different experiences, backgrounds, um, the better our ability as a group to solve problems, to think outside of the box, to creatively approach and more comprehensively approach problem solving, to increase efficiency. If there are more of us, there's more people to get stuff done, to increase participation, especially, we think about like if we're trying to build a well, right, for a community, how empowering is it to get the community involved in the building of the well, right? Like, we might have the know-how, we might have the skills, we might have the materials, but to engage the community in building a well that benefits the community, I mean, if we increase participation, that also increases the satisfaction, right? If it's just us, like, oh, we're the well builders, here we are to build your well, it's less, there's less of a like a buy-in, there's less of a sense of opportunity or pride in what was accomplished. And plus too, it's like if we come in and tell a community, well, we're building a well right here, and this is the well, and this is how it's going to work, and this is all these things, like the community knows things that we don't know about that location, about how building the well there might impact the neighbors, or we're seeing this a lot right now with data farms, right? Where the noise or the energy level is just, it's making people sick. uh so that's an example of somebody coming in and saying, we're building this here now, okay? As opposed to like, hey, we want to engage this community in some true like building of resources, like let's have a talk about it, let's have you involved in the process. Then there's less ownership, right? So hopefully that makes sense. So what's involved in group problem solving? This probably feels pretty lame to say, right? Or pretty um cheesy. I don't know. Again, it's like it feels like corporate speak, right? I even feel weird talking about this stuff, but it's important again to be able to highlight these things and to be able to identify, like, if you have a group, who's got what skill set, because these are the things that you need when you're engaging in group problem solving, right? You need to have effective meetings. So you need to be able to first and foremost get butts in the seats, right? Get people to show up. And then also to get them engaged, not just at the beginning of the meeting, not just at the end of the meeting, but throughout the meeting, right? Um, so whoever's leading the meeting, you want to make sure that they have that ability to, get people in, get butts in the seats, and also get them engaged, ask questions, like, have it be energetic enough and meeting the moment, meeting the folks where they're at, where they're coming in, right? You want to have those facilitation skills. So being able to diffuse explosive emotions. Um, the thing that came up for me when I was putting this slide together is Parks and Rec. They have like those like town meetings. It's like that, you need to be able to diffuse explosive emotions, make sure everybody's voice is heard, and they feel they've been heard, they know they've been heard, right? In whatever way that means to them, and you want to steer the group towards the best decisions. And I don't necessarily like this wording, but it's more about, we don't want to just keep going over the same points. We want to really like utilize the time and the group's like energy and effort and the fact that got people collected together, we want to make sure that what we are hearing, we are also reflecting in how decisions are made, right? Um, Again, I'm not telling you what is best for you or your community. It is, I am hearing from the majority of the folks in this room that XYZ is likely going to be the solution that offers or that hits the most points, that ticks the most boxes of all the things we've identified that we need to address, right? With this solution. Um, so again, steer the group towards a best decision. Again, that feels like manipulative to me. This is not that. It's making sure we're on topic, making sure that we're addressing the things that we came here to address so we don't get too far off track. We need a recorder. The recorder works with the facilitator. So this is a human being taking notes. We don't want to use AI unless we do, but again, uh, recommend not. They work with the facilitator. They also engage with the facilitator and work with the facilitator to make sure that participants who are engaged in the group problem solving session or meeting, that their opinions are heard, seen, remembered, and followed up on. And how they do that is by documenting it. I am part of NASW Rhode Island. Our meetings, our meeting minutes, we have to review and approve those at each session for the prior session. And it's really helpful to know who said what and when. And it's, high level, right? Like, but it's still at least is a good touch point for us to be able to go back and be like, oh yeah, we did that thing, didn't we? This is definitely one of the most important parts of the meeting. Um, Definitely, because you want to make sure that you are documenting and recording the process as it's happening so that you can go back and remember. I mean, it seems obvious, right? Um, you want to be able to define and analyze the problem. Like, what is the problem? I don't get to tell you what the problem is, right? Like, especially if I'm coming in from outside of the community as, like an expert of sorts. I'm not the expert on your community. You're the expert on your community. I'm the expert on taking the information that you have provided, that this group that is representative of the community, right? That has they've identified as the problem. Or, again, we can ask questions to get to the point of, like, if we're talking surface level stuff, then sometimes we'll get into this, but sometimes there's a root cause. And so we can maybe address the root cause, um, or identify even the root cause, and analyze it, you know? We want to be generating and choosing solutions. So again, ideas, there are no bad ideas, right? Um, there definitely are less feasible ones, but we want to be practical, I'm sorry, I can't see. Oh yeah. And then putting our solution into practice. So another important thing in a group problem solving session is talking about the follow through and the follow up and who's responsible for what, which is again why it's important to have the recorder, so that if there's somebody who needs to be held accountable, they can be held accountable. Like if something didn't happen, or if they need additional support, you know? Hey, it's the thing I just said. Analyzing root causes of problems, the but why technique. So, root causes are the basic reasons behind a problem. I think, again, this is pretty obvious, or it feels obvious or intuitive, but we want to talk about these things so that we can, if we get stuck, we can go back, and check in where we're at in the process. Why do we need to identify root causes? uh, we can find out which individual factors could provide targets of change, or, those areas of opportunity. It can explore social causes. If any of you are taking like policy analysis, so much of what's going on today I mean, all of everything today was impacted by yesterday and the day before and the day before, and the choices that people made in the past. Um, this would also allow us to potentially uncover multiple solutions for a problem, like things that we aren't thinking about. The historical context might be like, oh, wait, we need to go back further. Like this is actually a bigger issue than we originally thought, but if we get to the root of this then and address the root issue, um, then maybe we'll be able to help these different branches that have, kind of grown from it. So when do we want to identify root causes? Uh, Whenever we're addressing a community problem, when there's support for a solution, but it doesn't seem to get at the real cause, right? So we don't want to do what this guy's doing, right? The flex tape. You don't want to slap a band-aid on it. We want to fix it. Like, obviously in this advertisement, the guy is like, the hole was built on purpose, right? So if we slap a band-aid on it, what's to say there's not going to be another hole that's drilled in so that the exercise can be done again, um when there's ignorance or denial of why a problem exists. So we definitely have to agree that there's an issue before we can talk about like why. um if we can't even agree that there's an issue, then that's a difficulty. That's a bigger problem, but if we identify root causes, then there's more of an ability to acknowledge why a problem exists. So, keeping on digging to see where the roots go. So the but why technique, I included a picture of a kiddo here because it's like um my 3-year-old nephew is at this place now where he's just like, why why you know everything is, well, why, but why. So it's literally that, it's just asking that question until we get to the thing that we keep answering the same thing. So the problem is like too many or too few people are blank. um the one that immediately came to my mind for some reason is like, too few people are saving for retirement. But why? Because they can't. Could that have been prevented? Probably not the right question for this one, but like, well, why? Because they're not making enough money. Well, why? Because, rent is crazy. Have you seen inflation, groceries, the cost of eggs? Well, why? Well, I mean, if you track it back, like, people haven't been getting paid what they've been worth for a while. Executives have been earning way more than the average worker, and so even though costs of things increase over time, and so on and so forth, right? I'm not going to give you a whole economic lesson because I'm certainly not an economics major or specialist, but that's just kind of an example of the but why technique. I also wanted to kind of go over some primary and secondary sources of data, just kind of giving you the overview and kind of reviewing, so that you have this information, especially when we're talking papers, especially when we're talking your thesis, like thesis capstone project. Um, you want to be able to have a good mix of both primary and secondary sources of data. And that's kind of the point of, a capstone. So starting with secondary, which again, that doesn't feel intuitive, but secondary data is the information we already have access to. So we're talking global data like United Nations, the World Health Organization, national data like the US Census or the Annie E. Casey Foundation, state or regional data. So the different departments of state, the Department of State Department of Education, of Labor, of employment. There are just so many different state departments that focuses on like regional data. Um, we're also talking local data. So Usually it's like the national data breaks down into the state or regional data that then breaks down into the local data. We're talking like county, city. Um, Secondary data provides evidence of a community's strengths and weaknesses. You can identify trends with it. Again, like if you even just look at like population data for Denver, um, you know, we might be able to identify a trend of gentrification based on the population demographics over years, depending on like census data for different areas of the city. Uh, Secondary data helps provide context and a point of comparison. So if we were to compare, Denver to Providence, right? Um, it isn't a full picture, however. They say correlation, not causation. Um, we want to make sure that like the data supports whatever argument we're making, but we also want to make sure that it's like it goes both ways. Like it's not just something we pick out of um thin air or something that makes sense because of something else. So an example of that is like, statistically, you are more likely to get in a car accident or, any other kind of accident if you are closer to home. Yeah, because we live there. It's not like, oh, homes are, dangerous, right? Or where we live is generally dangerous. It's just that that's where we spend the most of our time. Um, we also want to make sure that our data is inclusive. So things that I would say right now about census data, it's probably not accurate. From, it might even be questionable starting around 2016 or a little bit earlier, just because of, um, the political atmosphere, and fear around, those who identify as queer or LGBTQIA plus, um, those who are Black and brown, people of color, um, just anybody who could potentially be targeted because of just, checking a box on a form, on census data. Immigration status is another big thing that is probably inaccurate right now. Um, yeah. Primary data is generally new data. So it can be subjective. So again, you've got the secondary data and the primary data that kind of interweave to create a tapestry. Um, the primary data contributes to the assessment and understanding of an issue. Um, and your goal is to get as close to the experience as possible of whatever population, demographic, or if you're specifically looking at like Iraq war veterans versus Vietnam veterans, right? And not like, versus, but like to give you an example of getting as close to the experience as possible. If I was trying to specifically get information about veterans from the Iraq war versus, I wouldn't go to somebody who fought in Vietnam, right? Or served in Vietnam. Um, we do this because we want to gain an understanding of assets to be enhanced, um, or the reasons for a problem or issue's existence. Again, these are people that you want in the room because they've experienced it. If I'm talking about prison reform, if I'm talking about, abolitionist perspectives around, um, restorative justice, and I don't have anybody who has been impacted directly by the carceral system, I, what am I even doing? you know? Um, if you are engaging with somebody, so for example, a couple weeks ago, we had a mass shooting in Pawtucket, where I live now. If there's a crisis that happens like this, or the natural disaster, the 2 feet of snow, um, you want to wait for the crisis to pass. You want to wait until folks are regulated, are safe, until the danger is gone, until people have received the support that they need before um, before engaging them in discussion around what the issue was or what we could have done better, or what needed to be different, what resources were needed that we didn't receive, or that the local uh, government or resources didn't meet, like needs that weren't met. Waiting for the crisis to pass means that we're just not taking advantage of people when they are particularly vulnerable. We don't want to exploit them or put anyone at risk. So, for example, if you allow, like, oh goodness, there was a TikTok video recently of like these folks who get their eye colors changed. And I'm assuming there's a deal, right? Like, if you let us film your experience and tell us all about how amazing it was at the end of the video, you can get your eye color changed for free. You can tell their faces, it's not an honest review of the service or what they actually feel about having their eye color changed now, You don't want to put people in a position where they feel they can't be honest or truthful, or it ends up triggering trauma. Um, this is why we have institutional review boards in place, or IRBs. So if you are going to be doing a survey or, testing something new, um, with a population, you will, for like your capstone, you will need to go through MSU Denver's IRB, and there's a whole process with that. But there's a reason for that. Like, we can't do, and we shouldn't do Tuskegee again. Like, that is like a non-starter, right? Like, we need things to be done ethically and done in such a way that it moves everybody forward and doesn't leave people behind or worse off, um, to advance anything, because that doesn't advance anything ultimately, right? What's that saying? If you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together. Yeah. So types of primary data gathering strategies are focus groups, interviews, like one-on-one interviews, group interviews, observations, surveys, uh, photo voice. So there are, it's almost like picture essays, different kinds of ways of putting those together, stories or vignettes. There's also a thing called the World Cafe, which I'm sure you've seen in your reading as well. There's a link in the reading too if you want to learn more about those. But it's um, like, for example, I went to a death cafe where it was literally just hosted by somebody, where it was a group of people that all got together that just wanted to talk about those big things that we don't all talk about all the time. So there's usually, it can take place at a cafe. I think this took place at a bookstore that did not have coffee, but um, it's a place to talk about specific ideas and, yeah, have true, honest discussions about those things. Frameworks for change. So put on your thinking caps here, or your little like take notes or what have you, whatever your way of approaching this material is. But um, organizational context and just practice considerations here. So the prepare framework is generally for community assessment and action. Uh, we love acronyms, right? So prepare is, we want to identify problems, uh, review reality, so what is possible, establish priorities, prepare goals and objectives, assess our resources, review organizational and community readiness, and establish program design and evaluation criteria. Um, the Imagine framework, which this is the one that you're going to be um, utilizing in an exercise today, but then also, or this week, I should say, but also utilizing in your uh, assignment, your final assignment for this class. It's a framework for community program development. So the I is an innovative idea, M is mustering support. There's also some interchangeable words, so I'm going to get into these a little bit more um, as we go on, but if the wording's a bit different, just know I included it because it could be a couple different things. A, assemble resources. G, gain community acceptance or that buy-in. I, initiate the program. N, neutralize opposition. E, evaluate and sustain. So, what are all those things? The Imagine framework's purpose is to provide a structured approach to strategic planning, so that we can explore intended and unintended impacts of what we're trying to address and things that people have tried in the past, that people are considering trying. It centers the voices of those most impacted, examines power and context. Um, and there are the 7 components of the framework. So, the Imagine framework, which are identify the need. So you conduct an assessment of the identified need uh, area, and then you clearly identify and use multiple data sources like client satisfaction data, staff surveys, agency data, interviews, and you also want to include background information. So we're talking like context and history um, from stakeholders. So again, stakeholders versus stockholders. Stakeholders, nonprofits, stockholders, for profit. Who has a stake in this issue, this problem? Who has a stake in this going well? Who has a stake in this, the potential impacts of what we're trying to do? Mobilize, or muster the energy, something like that. Uh, you want to identify your stakeholders involved in change, so constituents, clients, staff, community partners, funders, leaders. What voices need to be included? How are voices invited into the process? Power and positionality. So, how will voices be? Oh, that's, yeah, the same one. How will voices be invited into the process? Uh, what human rights issues may be considered in mobilizing for change? So, again, this is another piece where if you're working directly with a group or a population, right? This isn't like once or twice removed like meso or macro. The IRB comes in, right? Assemble a vision and plan. So you want to develop a clear vision of what change will achieve and how it aligns with social work values and the organization's mission and values. Apply critical consciousness to your vision and plan. Um, Outline short-term and long-term goals and measurable objectives. So we're talking those SMART goals, right? I know they can be annoying. Believe me, I know. But SMART goals, how do we know that we've achieved, you know, the different milestones that we're hoping to achieve? How do we know that what we're implementing is being effective unless we measure it, unless we evaluate? Um, Describe specific strategies and action steps that will be taken to implement the change. Gain support and buy-in. So immediately like the I have a dream speech came to my mind. Like, you want to develop a clear vision of what the change will achieve and how it aligns with, for us, social work values and the organization's mission and values. We want to apply critical consciousness to our vision and plan, outline short-term and long-term goals and measurable objectives, and describe specific actions and strategies. And that is exactly the same. That is assemble a vision and plan. Cool. Don't know what happened there. I apologize. Um, we want to paint the picture, right? I think something that MLK Jr.'s speech, like I Have a Dream speech, and why it's so still is so resonant and impactful and powerful is that he paints that picture, you know? Um, we want to know what we're working towards. And if you're able to paint a picture, if you're able to get that participation and engagement, I mean, that's a big part of it, you know? That I mean, that's the kinetic energy, you know, that's needed to build up to mobilize people to affect change, right? If you don't explain the why, um, a lot of folks can't get to the how. Like, why are we doing this? You know, what are we working for? What are we doing this for? You know, implement the plan. Timeline with steps for implementing the change. It's good to have a timeline. Um, are there training needs or ongoing feedback plans? Like, how are we coordinating? Like, is it a daily stand up or stand down meeting? Is it a weekly, you know, virtual meeting where it's like an hour and we really go point by point? Um, what are your plans to center the voices of those most impacted? And also just some strategies for maintaining. So you've already engaged key stakeholders, but how are you going to maintain that engagement and your commitment to those stakeholders throughout? Um, you know, just getting a plan in place and setting it into motion, that's not where it stops. Like, that's the beginning, right? You know, we need to make sure that as we're doing that assessment, that ongoing assessment, that we're including the key stakeholders in that feedback process, that we're making sure that they're a part of decisions. Like, if that's, you know, if that's part of how we set up the plan, we need to make sure that they're still engaged throughout. We don't want people just showing up at the beginning and the end. We want them engaged throughout. We want to neutralize resistance. This sounds awful, right? Neutralize resistance. Like, we're not like offing anybody here. Like, it's nothing like that, right? Neutralizing resistance means that we give it a path. Resistance is a good thing. If you don't have resistance, like, you have nothing to push off of, you know? I mean, gravity, like, we're constantly in like a resistance with gravity. I am not an electrical engineer or anything like that, but like, these are the things that came to mind for me, like the images, like, you know, the reason that we have like a three plug outlet is so that there can be a ground wire, you know? To me, that's like, again, we're not trying to shut off resistance. We want to give it a path, right? So if you reflect on potential opposition to the change initiative and you are able to kind of break it down, like describe the possible uh you know, conflicts so that you can then meet those strategies, right? Or sorry, I'm getting to the point where I'm losing like my voice. Um uh if you're able to identify potential obstacles to the goals set out in your plan, then you can proactively address those goals or those obstacles, right? You know, um, you want to make space for an inclusive plan to hear all perspectives, including those that are resistance, right? Um, and just plan for ongoing feedback and adjustments. Like, no plan is perfect from the outset. We don't want it to be. If it was perfect, then people don't want to engage as much either, right? But if they feel like they're actually participating and that their voice matters, heck yeah. Even if they hate it all the way through, like, people appreciate a space to be seen and heard, even if it's negative, you know? Negative because, like, again, not saying that like anything, I'm not trying to put a value judgment on that, right? Um, yeah. This is not saying that we accept people who make others feel less than. This is definitely not that, okay? I want to make that clear too. We want to evaluate our progress. So when we somehow I managed to do this again. Wow. I'm so sorry, y'all. Like I said, I've been a little bit sick. Evaluating our progress means that we need to create, if there's not already a system in place, like we've got scales in therapy, right? With scales, it's like 0 to 10, pain, right? Like if you're in pain or your depression or your anxiety, like where are you at on the scale from 0 to 10? We need a system and a language, a common language, something that can be documented, something that can be tracked, and something that's consistent for evaluating our progress. So the three little faces here. Some places you go now, I think the post office has these, or some some of the like CVS or those kinds of places, some fast food places where it's a happy face or a frowny face. It's just like, how did we do today? It's silly, but I mean, how else do we know unless we have a way of truly evaluating our progress, right? Um, so some examples of some proposed change plan initiatives. Again, you're going to be doing the change plan proposal. That's part one. That's what we'll be talking about this Friday. The second part implements the Imagine framework, right? So the change plan initiative, where some things that folks have done in the past, updating an under-resourced waiting room for families that invites a decolonized, inviting environment. So having, if it's like a family planning center, having different types of parents, or some same-sex couples on the brochures, making sure that if you are in a community where um, there is a population of folks that doesn't speak English as their first language, figuring out how to get some resources on hand in people's primary speaking language. Making sure that there are resources available for folks who, you know, don't read. Um, Having ADA accessibility for all parts of your organization, right? Um, Developing a new offering, like an after school parent child play space in a housing community, or maybe a new training, like noticing that, hey, there's a crap ton of trauma out there right now. Might be good if we all got a trauma informed care training, right? Um, you know, a new offering could be a whole bunch of different things, like a resource, like a list of resources for folks who are being particularly impacted. But that way, an organization is handing out the same resources every time and making sure that it's updated. Because resources come and go, organizations come and go. Another example is addressing a recurring conflict with neighbors in a supported housing community by like developing an advisory group. Um, so if noise is an issue, or if, some, this reminds me of like an HOA, which that doesn't feel great, but I don't know, being able, like in an assisted living facility, having a group of folks who are, mediators, like people who have done this type of work before, where they don't mind helping neighbors, resolve conflicts. Like, why does that have to be the staff that deals with that, or not deals with that, but that addresses that when, you know, staff members aren't community members, they're not residents. Giving people like the space and the autonomy and the tools to resolve conflict within that community. I mean, it just makes sense, right? Um, so when would we use prepare versus imagine? And I know I gave you more on imagine versus the prepare, but we use the prepare framework to analyze and plan responses to community problems and organizational needs. It emphasizes a systemic, values driven approach which is rooted in social work ethics and attention to context. The Imagine framework is more, it's like a practical guide for designing new programs or interventions. It's more about how to turn an idea into an action. Um, and it navigates like real world resistance and partnership building and sustainability. Cool. Cool. Trying to think if this is, I apologize again too. It's been one of those things. I'm trying to imperfectly just put the stuff out this week and trust that y'all will hold me accountable, but also be kind and understanding too that I'm a little bit in la la land because of coming out of being sick and unburying from 2 feet of snow. But um yeah, okay. So self-reflection questions for this week are: what did you notice, observe, or hear that is prompting a proposed change? So in your classes, in your personal life, in at your internship or your job, what are you aware of in terms of your own thoughts, feelings, and responses in regards to when a proposed change is prompted? How might the context shape the process of engaging in change? For social workers, right? Like context is kind of everything. What might be some of the challenges of engagement? What are some of the possibilities? What insights do you take away from this regarding the process of engaging others in a proposed change initiative? Cool. Thank you again so much for your patience with me. Yeah, I'm hoping to get back into a rhythm here, but Mother Nature has been a little wonky, which has internally also made me a bit wonky. So, looking forward to getting back into a rhythm with y'all. Hope everybody's staying safe, and I'll see you in the next one.